I'm Linda Abraham, President and Founder of Accepted. I'm moderating today's webinar, How to Create, let me just share my screen, How to Create Successful Secondary Applications, which will be presented by Accepted's consultant, Alicia McNease Nimonkar. A few items worth noting before we start. Number one, if you've not yet downloaded your worksheet, your webinar worksheet, take a second to do so and print it out. I think it will help you get the most from today's presentation. Let me also give you a URL, a link to that if you haven't done so yet. So just give me a second here. Here again is a link to the worksheet. Okay, that's number one. Hand raising. You can raise your hands by clicking on the hand on your control panel, and I'd like to test your hand raising ability at the moment. I kind of feel like the stewardesses. Okay, raise your hand if you are here because you want to become a physician, your dream career. Okay, most of you know how to use Zoom and are here for the right reasons. That's great. Thank you very much. You can put your hands down now or just click on that icon again. Questions. If during the course of the presentation you have questions, please share them in the question window. Alicia will answer them at the end of the webinar. We've allowed time for Q&A. If we ask or Alicia asks an open-ended question during the course of the webinar, please post your answers in the chat window. Keeping the chat window for your responses to questions and the question window for your questions makes it much easier for us to go through the questions, and they'll actually go faster. We may ask you to unmute yourself to ask a question because that allows for us to follow up and makes it, frankly, a little bit more lively. I get tired of hearing Alicia's and my voices. You're going to receive a brief questionnaire when you leave. Please fill it out. I review all responses, and we use them to both improve the webinars and choose additional topics for webinars. And last, but definitely not least, certainly not in the applicant's eyes, is the special for today's attendees. $100 off any order over $1,250, which would include our 5-hour plan. The coupon code is SUCCESS, and this ends July 14th, 2020, which is next Tuesday. Now, whenever we have a webinar, we also like to learn a little bit about our audience. So first of all, in the chat window, where are you located? City and state in the United States, city and country if you are outside the United States. San Jose is practically a neighbor here. Athens, Georgia, Seattle, Washington, Cleveland, Ohio, Baltimore, Salt Lake City, Miami, Troy, Michigan, another San Jose, Bel Air, Maryland, Houston, Texas, Minneapolis, Los Angeles, a neighbor, San Francisco. Anybody in Boston? That's where Alicia is. I didn't see Boston. Upper Marlboro, Maryland, all over, really. Nice crowd. Okay, but nobody from, you don't have any neighbors here today. Anybody from Massachusetts? Washington, D.C., more Tucson, Arizona. Okay. Now, we also have some polls for you. Let me get that up. And the first poll is, where are you at in the application process? Okay. The options are, haven't submitted any primary applications yet, have submitted primary but haven't received secondaries, have started receiving secondaries. Okay. Again, the options are no primary yet, have submitted primaries but no secondary, and started getting secondaries. Okay, which would actually be pretty amazing. All right, so here we go. I'm going to end the poll. We have 78% having voted, and here are the results. 47% have not submitted their primary yet. 47% have submitted the primary but haven't started receiving secondaries, and 6% have started receiving secondary applications. And then we have one other poll for you, a moment, and it is, are you a first-time applicant or a re-applicant? Again, are you a first-time applicant or a re-applicant? Okay, votes are coming in, that's great. We're at 63, 65%, 68%. Can we get it up over 80, 75% having voted? 5, everybody should fit into one of those two categories. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm ending the poll with 75% having voted, and 76% of you are first-time applicants, and 24% are re-applicants. Okay, great. Well, good to know. Thank you very much for sharing that. And here again are the results. Okay. Finally, I'm thrilled to introduce Alicia McNease Nimonkar, who will present how to create successful secondary applications. Alicia started advising acceptance clients in 2012. Her clients simply rave about her supportive assistance. Prior to joining Accepted, she both evaluated applications and advised med school applicants as director of the UC Davis Postbac program. She brings enormous, whoops, got the wrong person up there. I guess we don't have your picture there, okay. She brings enormous insight and experience with the medical school application process to this webinar this evening. I'm going to be quiet now and let Alicia present how to create successful secondary applications.
Thank you for the introduction, Linda, and thank you everyone for joining us. I want to ask, for those of you listening, and for those of you who submitted secondaries before, so 24% of those who voted in the last poll, what could you have done better?
In the chat window, please.
What did you learn about the experience, and what could you have done better?
What you've done differently. Submitted earlier, says Deborah. Send earlier within 2 weeks, preferably. Be more confident and answer honestly, even if you don't have great writing skills. And then Andrew wrote, still third-time applicant, still no idea.
Aww.
Peyton writes, I would have shared more stories about myself. Now I'm hearing myself again. If you could turn down the speaker a bit, that would be helpful, Alicia.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
How's that?
I think it's, yeah, I don't hear myself anymore. Okay, good.
Awesome, cool.
All right, so go ahead.
Okay, so thank you for those responses. I would say, as someone mentioned, submitting earlier, right, the timeline is important when you return those secondaries. You want to keep track of all the dates that you receive each secondary so you can return those within 2 weeks, 1 or 2 weeks. Having deadlines close together are often issues that people come across. Needing lots of time to complete so many essays, so people are often surprised by how much it takes to write and submit all of their secondaries. Making sure that you submit quality essays, right, that can be a problem if you're trying to turn them around very quickly. Not knowing what to write is something that a lot of students struggle with that I've seen. And getting overwhelmed, so getting so many secondaries at the same time, you don't know where to start. So we're going to talk about how to prevent all of those things from happening to you this cycle. So for those of you who are new to the process, secondary applications are sent out after medical schools have received your primary application. So secondary applications typically contain anywhere from 1 long essay to 5 short essays on average. They allow the medical school to learn more about you as an applicant and to find out how much you know about them and their school. They often give you a chance to update the school on your current activities or recent publications. But basically, they want to know what you're doing while you're applying to medical school, and actions speak louder than words. And I have good news for you. Letters of recommendation are due with the secondary applications. So you want to turn those letters in by or before the deadline that each school gives you to return the secondary. There are 3 different types of secondary applications. There are automatic, manual, and the CASPER. So manual, automatic secondaries are just as the name implies. They are automatic, right? You receive them without the school reviewing your application. So it's an automated screening process in most schools. They put in GPA and Mcat parameters and will automatically reject students who don't meet those parameters. It is a money-making industry, so it is not a compliment to get an automatic secondary. And the way that you know it's an automatic secondary is how quickly you receive it after you submit your application. It's not humanly possible for someone to review that many applications before they send those out. The only exception that I've seen in my experience are applicants who apply as disadvantaged may be screened by a person before being rejected by most medical schools. Now, the second type of secondary are manual secondaries. This means that your application has been screened by a person before an invitation is sent out. The school clearly is demonstrating, right, a genuine interest in you as an applicant, and there are fewer invitations typically sent out through this type of process because it is labor-intensive, time and labor-intensive. The third type of secondary is the Casper. So it's a timed, these are timed essay responses. It takes about 90 minutes to take the Casper. You must register 3 days before your preferred test dates. And it's described as a computer-based situational judgment test designed to evaluate core personal characteristics considered essential for students to be successful in medical school and ultimately as practicing physicians. So some of these competencies include professionalism, ethical grounding, empathy, compassion, and cultural sensitivity. And you can take this test anywhere you have access to a computer with audio capabilities and a reliable internet connection. So it consists of a series of hypothetical, everyday situations presented through a variety of formats, including text, animation, or live action video. Each situation relates to one or more personal characteristics. So examinees are asked how they would respond or behave in the situation portrayed. So the good news about the Casper is you can't study for it, but the faster you type, the easier time you will have. Because you will have a very short amount of time to type your responses to the videos, text, images that they share with you. Now let's talk about the timeline for secondary applications. Automatic secondaries can arrive as early as 2 or more weeks after your MCAT application is transmitted to schools. Hand-selected secondary invitations can take weeks longer for you to receive, typically 4 to 6 weeks after the application is shared with schools. It is best, if possible, to submit secondary applications 1 to 2 weeks after receiving them. So this means that as soon as you're finished with the primary, if you can get started on your secondary applications, it will be that much easier to return them within 1 to 2 weeks of receiving them. And if that's the one thing you take away from this webinar, I will be happy. So I had a student 2 cycles ago. When I went through her application, she was a reapplicant who decided to work with me after applying unsuccessfully the first time. After going through her primary application with her, I was completely puzzled because it was fantastic. Her numbers were strong, her activities were fabulous, her essays were well written. I was puzzled until I asked her when she returned her secondary applications. And she returned them 1 to 2 months after receiving them. And that by itself, that was the only possible thing that could have explained why she was rejected. So return all secondaries within 1 to 2 weeks of receiving them. It's the best way to get yourself an interview. Are there any questions before we move on?
There are several questions. Actually, I'm going to, and let's take at least one now because I think it's very relevant to what you're talking about. Stephanie, if it's okay with you, I'll unmute you and allow you to talk. You have a good question, Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I just wanted to ask, I think I heard you mention that the earliest secondaries then typically come around 2 weeks after the transmission date. So that would that mean that like the earliest time point would be we submitting the secondaries within 4 weeks of July 10th? Does that sound reasonable?
Well, this year's a little bit different, right, with everything going on. So this is our best estimate based on what has occurred in the past.
Mhm.
I'm curious, is there anybody who has submitted their primary to MCAS who has received a secondary? Because, right, there were people who have received secondaries.
Yeah, I
Was
noticed
that
that.
from AMCAS?
That's what that's what I suspect. In the chat window, please, if you submitted only to MCAS and got a secondary, can you speak up or raise your hand?
So to answer your question, Stephanie, I'm reaching out to everybody else.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
No, nobody's raising their hand now.
So I'm
So I
wondering,
think they would be
were those
ACOMAS.
secondaries from
They were from
ACOMAS?
ACOMAS. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, that makes sense to me. Okay, so to answer your question, Stephanie,
Mhm.
I would say about, I'm guessing within 2 to 4 weeks after your applications are transmitted, and that's July 10th, right?
Right.
So,
Tomorrow.
yeah, tomorrow. So I'm thinking within 2 to 4 weeks, you will probably begin to get automatic secondaries.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for helping me answer that question.
I think it is possible that they could get them earlier. I mean, because they already have the apps, you know.
It's possible. Yeah, it's possible. But typically,
It takes 2 weeks.
cycle before last, do you remember, Linda, cycle before last, the applications, the secondaries were coming in like as soon as students were submitting the primary. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And then last year, I think schools kind of slowed down a bit, and it was 2 to 4 weeks after submitting the primary. And then this year, they're transmitting the applications later.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really interesting, but I would guess that within 2 to 4 weeks after tomorrow.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right.
Any other questions?
We have a couple more, but so here's one from Jennifer. Do you think that they will hold secondary applications until MCAT scores are received if you still haven't been able to take your test yet? You know, many schools are saying submit your secondary. We'll wait for your MCAS in order to evaluate.
Exactly. As Linda's saying, exactly. No, so they're not going to wait for your MCAT to send you a secondary application. So this could be your year, right?
Right.
That could work out to your advantage.
Right. Okay. Let's move on. We'll come back to the questions later on. Okay.
Excellent.
Yeah, some very good questions coming in.
All right, so we are going to talk about shortcuts to maximize your strategy next. So starting early. There are posts available on the accepted.com website with the secondary essay questions with tips for a lot of medical schools. Not all of them, but for quite a lot of them. And you are welcome to use those to pre-outline and to pre-write your secondaries. Usually from year to year, schools don't change their secondaries very much. Every once in a while, one school will add a question or change one question. I've never seen a school change all the questions. And this year, I'm going to guess, I wouldn't be surprised if they deleted questions. What do you think, Linda? I'm expecting to see that.
I don't know. I think they're preoccupied just, you know.
Yeah, so either there'll be no changes.
I think there's going to be fewer changes this year than typical.
Yeah, I could see no changes, or I could see them cutting 1 or 2 questions.
I could also see them adding a question about your response to COVID.
Yeah, that's possible. That's possible.
That I would say.
That's possible. Okay, so after completing your application materials for the primary, please do yourself a favor and immediately begin working on your secondary essays for your top school choices. To be organized about it, the best approach that I've seen the most successful students take is to create an Excel spreadsheet to track the schools and the deadlines. So you want to list all schools that you've applied to, list the dates that you received the secondary invitation, and the dates that you submitted them, that you returned them. This will help you keep track of your progress for all the schools and stay focused and motivated, right? You'll have a big picture perspective and you won't get caught up and lost in the details or miss any deadlines. If you can, working with a professional editor or admissions consultant like me and my colleagues can be incredibly helpful, right? We would give you advice and editing assistance on your essays, and help you improve the quality of your writing and your chances of gaining an interview. And also the process is a lot of fun. And we can also help you identify what information to include in your essays. So a lot of people have a hard time deciding which experiences to cover. They have difficulty looking at the strategy of, okay, if you're given these 3 questions, what would be the best responses for each one? You know, so I love working with students and helping them identify all the best possible strategies. So now we're going to talk about the anatomy of a secondary application. There are 3 basic types of questions. So you can receive one long autobiographical essay or several short questions. For example, Baylor asks, indicate any special experiences, unusual factors, or other information you feel would be helpful in evaluating you, including but not limited to education, employment, extracurricular activities, prevailing over adversity. You may expand upon but not repeat Mcat's application information. There are a few questions, some short response questions that are common on this topic, like what are the challenges that you've overcome, what's the most rewarding experience you've ever had, any special interest in a particular area in medicine, or where do you see yourself in 10 years, which is super common. They can also request new information, including updates, or you can cover old information from a new angle, but clearly not for this one because they don't want anything repeated from the primary. So you have to be very careful in reading these essay prompts and covering only what they're asking you to. Often, you can cover events from childhood, but I don't recommend focusing solely on them. And they do want to get to know you as a person, so let your personality shine. Often, past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. So giving examples of things that you have done in the past, will indicate what you're likely to do in the future. So for those of you listening, what kind of information would you include about yourself? What are you planning on writing about yourself?
In number 4, in the chat window, rather. And I posted a link to the spreadsheet that you can use for organizing yourself. It's
Oh,
in
nice.
the chat window. Yeah. Remember that?
That's
It was
super
a post
helpful.
you wrote. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's already a template ready for you to use.
Right. Okay. Adapt, use, change, make it yours. But again, okay, here we go. Marina says, plan on writing about how I learned to speak 6 languages and how helpful that has been. That should be a fascinating essay.
Ooh, yeah.
Anybody else? What kind of information do you plan to include? Does adding being an office manager help, like participating in leadership positions?
Absolutely. So professional development or leadership is incredibly valuable.
Organizational skills, dealing with people. I think it also depends what you say about your work. If I was an office manager, does that mean you were shuffling papers around, or does that mean you were interacting with people? Here's another one from Peyton. Growing up on a farm and having to assist in wildlife and livestock rehabilitation. Or from Erica,
Ooh.
study abroad experience. Zoya, theater experience. From C, how I took challenges in computer programming for AI med data. And then Marina, who I think was the one who knew all those languages, can I talk about visiting rural areas and helping people in rural areas? I had the opportunity to visit the Middle East and visited villages while I was there. Or Kyle, talking about the adversity I faced as a gay man and the way the internal struggles and the things I learned about myself made me more confident to pursue everything else I wanted in life. Okay.
Yeah, these are fantastic.
Some Rana Lobb at Hopkins developed an activity-based therapeutic approach for treatment of spinal cord injury. Can we talk about, military experiences as a naval officer? Wow, this is a very impressive group. My hat's off to all of you. Okay, assisting my father as a manager in a food service. Okay. There's a lot that people can write about. That's pretty clear.
Yeah, these are wonderful. Yeah, they're looking really for any kind of exceptional educational experiences, learning opportunities you've had, any special skills you've developed, any achievements like running a marathon, any kind of physical fitness achievements. I have a student who won a world title in a sport, and that's, right, totally exciting and exceptional. The one thing I can tell you I don't recommend doing is I had a student 3 cycles ago who, I'm not sure why he did this, but he wrote about playing the ukulele for almost every single essay that he returned. And this is before he started working with me. So once he started working with me on secondaries, clearly, right, we took a more strategic approach. And at that point, he started getting interviews. So you want to be careful. You don't want to be too quirky or have too much personality. But it is good to share your genuine interests and how they will help you become a better doctor. What's that?
You also don't want to be a one-trick pony.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. But there are so many things you could cover that would work really well.
Okay.
All right, moving on. So for the strategy for this type of essay, it's helpful to create a timeline of your life that includes all significant events and or use an updated copy of your resume or CV. And there's a really cool website. It's called Suturi.com, Suturi.com, I think it is. But you can actually create an interactive timeline. You can put videos, photos, link websites, all kinds of different types of information you can share. And it's a really fun way, you know, if you work with friends or family, to put together a timeline that you'll end up using again and again for your secondaries. And it's a lot of fun to kind of look at what are all the different possible things you've done or experiences you've had that have influenced your decision to go into medicine. So I recommend checking off the items you've already covered in your primary application or highlighting them somehow with a color so that you know what you've already covered. And then creating a list from the remaining items that you have not covered, which are related to clinical research, professional experience, leadership, community service. And if you have any items on your list that relate to how you've overcome adversity, those would be incredibly valuable and things you should definitely include in the application. So strategically selecting the activities or events that will reveal more about you as a person, right? Create an outline using this short list. And that's really going to help you highlight your strengths. The second type of secondary question are essay questions about them. So the best example I have of this is Cornell's question, why our school, right? They get right to the point. They want to know how much you know about their school and what is important to them. So for these types of questions, you really want to do your research. So for those of you listening, what are some ways you can find out more about the school?
In the chat window, please. Social media, says Srija. Mission statement and vision, says Elaine. Websites, information sessions, and current students, says Abby. Kyle says MSAR. Several are saying read about their mission, read facts, FAQs, attend recruiting fairs and workshops, ask AdCom, says James, if they can get you in touch with students. Somebody says Reddit. I don't know if that's the most reliable source, but anyways. Andrew says research opportunities. I apologize if I mispronounced name. Didiolu says mission statement, current students. Visar says PubMed for publications from school.
Oh, that's a great, I've never heard that one before. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. I had spoken to a dean in another department. That's also good. That's from Hope.
Yeah. Yeah, these are excellent. So the things I've seen students use in the past, which have been helpful, is, of course, the mission statement, as someone said, right? Don't miss the obvious. The website, of course. Virtual pre-med fairs or campus events, right, if they're having them right now. As someone said, current students can be a valuable resource. The MSAR, for sure. Virtual tours of the schools, if they have them online. Networking online. And definitely, I love the idea of getting in touch with the AdCom to reach current students if they do that on their campus. Research opportunities would work. In PubMed, that's a brilliant approach. That's a really brilliant idea. I've never heard that one before, so thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so take the time to get to know more about the school. So join their social media, take their virtual tour, read the student handbook, right? Do your research and come up with a list of at least 10 or more reasons why you want to attend their school. And then just use the top 3 or 5 or as many as you have space for depending on the character or word limit for the essay. So the strategy I recommend for this type of question is demonstrate how well you know their school and show them how much research you've done by establishing a clear understanding of what they offer that will most benefit you by helping you reach your career goals. So since space is limited, keep this essay focused and select only the most relevant, honest, and important reasons why you want to attend their medical school. So for those of you listening, what are some things you could include?
In the chat window, please. Format of teaching, sub-internships unique to that school. Good, Kayla.
Yes.
Specific programs unique to the school, service learning opportunities, knowledge of their student-run clinics and the populations they serve that interest you. Very good, James. I wanted to talk about how they seem committed to diversity and racial justice based on what they've been posting on social media. That's from Shrija. Didiliolu, service orientation. Though most medical schools do have a service orientation. I guess some are more research, but there's always service there. Visar writes.
Well, the way to know how service-oriented they are, sorry to interrupt you, Linda,
Sure,
is if they've won awards, right? If they've received awards or community recognition for the amount of community service that they provide, that's a good indication. Michigan State often wins awards for their service.
Okay, great. Andrew says wanting to interact with an underserved community, high impact publications, rankings of specialties of interest. This is from Visar. The curriculum, that's pretty important.
Yep.
Do they include a USMLE or COMLEX review with tuition, or is it separate? That's another thing. And I think and then Hope writes, I had taken a master's program at LECOM that would be unique. So.
Yeah, these are wonderful examples. So being extensive in your research and being honest about what most excites you that they offer. But I would say really taking the time to figure out what's unique about their program from other medical schools. And the more schools you research, the better you're going to get at quickly figuring out what's best about what they offer and how will it best support you. And actually, in our secondary application tip posts, we do provide details about the program. So that's a good place to start if you're not sure. All right, so now we're going to talk about the third type of secondary essay. So essay questions about you and them. So as you can see, it's like a Venn diagram, right? They want to know how you will be a good fit for their school. So a common question is, how will you enhance the diversity on our campus? You'll get that from a lot of schools. And these questions require that you balance enough details about yourself with how much you know about their campus and how you would fit in. So in the previous type of question, when it was questions about them, right, you want to really focus on their school, what they offer. For this type of question, you want to focus on why what they provide will take your career to the next level. What exceptional programs or learning opportunities do they offer that will help you get where you're going. So these questions require a really good balance. The strategy I recommend is to make a long list of your unique qualities, talents, and experiences, the longer the better, and cross out those items that you've already included in your personal statement, right? And identify your top 3 on the list as they relate to the school's mission and goals. And explain how those 3 identifiers will allow you to connect with the community and how they represent you as an individual. So really focusing on that space right in the middle of the Venn diagram, that overlap between you and the school. So are there any questions for those of you listening before we continue on?
There are a ton of questions, and we'll take a couple now. An anonymous attendee asked, how would you recommend starting our response for the why X school question? Is it strong enough to start with saying, I'm interested in X school because, or do you have other starting formats you recommend?
I don't want to recommend like a template approach because everyone's essay should sound unique to them. And what I love about what I do, my work with students, is I want to help them find their voice and just say things that are authentic and unique to them. So I would never want someone's essay to sound like anybody else's. There's so many ways to start this essay. It's possible to start it with humor. It's possible to start it with personal connections to the school. There's so many ways you could approach this.
Can I add a little bit here?
Yeah, please.
All right. I would strongly discourage you from starting with I'm interested in X school because that's the most common response around.
Yeah, true.
And I think the possibilities for how you start essays really vary, and one of the determinants will be the length of essay required. If you have 100 characters, it may be appropriate to respond with I am interested because blah blah blah, or just what attracts you. You may not even want the I'm interested because. If you have a more reasonable length, the great way to start is with an anecdote, a meaningful moment that made whatever is meaningful to you meaningful, and then how it relates to the school. But starting with declarative statements in general are pretty dull unless they're truly shocking. And if
yeah.
All right, and
Yep.
I don't know that you necessarily need to shock, especially not in an inauthentic way, but you can you can start out with an anecdote is usually the best way to do it. Description of a scene. Those are, I think, more effective ways than I am interested in school X because. All right, now it was a great question. Thank you for it. Jennifer asks, should you leave a unique or important activity off of your primary so that you can cover it in the secondary? What do you think about that?
Interesting. So I do actually have students save something for secondary. So if there's a special talent or hobby that's maybe not related directly to medicine, often it's a good idea to have something like that to surprise them with in the secondaries. So as long as you're using all 15 activity descriptions, then that's a good approach. But it's more important that you use all of the activity descriptions, right, than to save something for later. So if you've used all 15, and you still have more, then yeah, save 1 or 2 things to surprise them with.
Okay, we'll take one more, and then we'll move on. This is also from an anonymous attendee, and she's asking about he or she, I'm not sure which it is asking about the ukulele example. Do you mean you wrote about the ukulele for every single essay sent by one school? Like all the questions were answered with the ukulele?
It was amazing. It was like 2 out of 3 questions consistently, like for like 15 secondaries or something. It was, I don't know why he did that. I have no idea. I think he thought it would show personality. So it was pretty much like 2 out of 3 questions. He found a way to like work it in, even when it really wasn't relevant. Yeah.
Because he was proud of that ukulele. I
Yes,
also remember
yes.
reviewing essays for one of our consultants, and this particular client, he unfortunately had a health problem that really affected what he could do and couldn't do. He had been an athlete; he could no longer do the athletics that he had been doing as a younger high school student.
Oh
Let's say,
no.
yeah, yeah. And all he wanted to write about was this experience. And I was talking to his consultant, and I said, he really, does he have anything else to write about? Okay, I understand it. This is a formative experience. It's appropriate to write about it. But is there anything else? Because it's like, what have you done once you couldn't do the sports? So she says,
I've seen that before, yeah, where it's
yeah,
sometimes people have like unprocessed trauma.
yeah,
And so usually when someone wants to write about the same thing over and over again, there's something going on there, right? Like there's something that needs to be processed, or they want to understand something. And but with the ukulele, I mean, that was out of left field.
right. Well, not only that, I don't think you want to use your medical school application as a therapy session. It's not going to help you get
No, you
in.
really
You're
don't.
right. They
That is,
do need
yeah.
closure, Elaine. You're right. But this isn't the place to get it. Okay. I agree with you. So anyway,
Exactly.
the consultant spoke to him. Turned out he'd done some really interesting things. And he did write about the impact of the illness on him. And then he wrote about the other stuff.
Okay, that's
And
great.
yes. And it was a really strong application in the end. So yeah, again, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. You don't want to be a one-trick pony, and let's move on because we really do have a lot of questions here.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think people don't realize, I think the bigger point here is people don't realize how much their writing reveals about them, right? Like your writing, it's a window into what you're thinking and feeling. So you want to be strategic and careful about what you share, right?
Right. Right.
All right, so the next step, if all goes well, which I hope it does for all of you, you will be invited to submit a video interview anytime between the beginning of August and the end of April, depending on when you submitted your MCAT application and the schools you are applying to. So the AAMC is using a new system this year. It's called the AAMC Video Interview Tool for Admissions. It's a one-time online unidirectional interview. You'll have 6 questions to answer, and they're presented in text prompts, and you will record your response, right, audio and video. There'll be no human interviewer. You will just have the text question to respond to. You'll have 1 minute to read the question and reflect on each of the written questions, and you'll have up to 3 minutes to record a response. You may, and this is interesting, this part's super interesting. I'll be curious to hear what you have to say about this, Linda. You may complete all 6 questions in one sitting, or you may complete any number of questions you choose, as long as all questions are completed by the required medical school deadline.
Whoa.
And the break between questions may be as long as you choose. Why would they do that? I'm so curious.
I don't know. I don't know why anybody would want to do that unless, there was some
I feel like that would be dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I'm surprised at that. As somebody who sometimes has to record videos or speak without having any, mostly recording videos just professionally, I can tell you it is a very weird experience. I don't know have any of you done that? Had to record videos for yourself, just to yourself, not with friends, just like, hi, so-and-so, and yes, for proscribe interview. Okay, so then you've had that. It's a weird experience, isn't it? Or you do it for you? No, I'm scared of this. What I'd suggest you do, and it's not terrible. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. Wait a minute. Wait. What you do have to do, though, is I'd practice a little bit. What you can do is get on Skype and, record something with somebody on the other end or any video conferencing tool. Turn them off, their camera off, and you just record, and they can give you feedback.
Oh, that's brilliant.
One thing I found was helped me was if I put a smiley face up near the camera, because otherwise I forgot to smile, and I'd come across as very stern, almost angry. And I don't think that's me at all. So yeah, okay, so good. You had oral presentation and you recorded yourself first. That would be one good way to practice it also. Yeah, but So that's just a tip. Also, make sure it's quiet around you. You don't want a dog barking or a young child barging in, or even your parents barging in. You know, make sure it's quiet. Tell people to leave you alone for a few minutes. And I just do it. I wouldn't do it over, you know, months. Just get it over with. Okay?
Yeah, I feel like it would be dangerous to take a break in between questions. I think I would plan to complete them all in one sitting, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so
Yeah, I would too.
you can submit these videos anywhere from August 6th is when they're first available through April 30th. And there's not yet a list of participating schools that I saw, but there's supposed to be one put up anytime soon. So not all of the AAMC medical schools may use this tool, but it'll be interesting to see as soon as those post how many will.
Okay.
And so it is going to be on a rolling admissions basis, right, that you receive these invitations to interview. Usually it begins around, usually when you receive your acceptances after you've submitted your video or after you've interviewed in the past, you can begin receiving acceptances anytime from October to as late as August. Again, I want to emphasize this year may be different, but in the past, students have received acceptances anytime between October and late August. Again, in the past, most medical schools began classes between July and September, but who knows, like this could also change, right? Because they're accepting Mcats later. I mean, I don't know that they'll change when they begin courses, but this year is going to be very different. So for those of you listening, what is the most valuable concept, idea, or piece of advice or information that you've gained from my presentation today?
So far, we haven't gotten to the Q&A. In the chat window, please. Timeline for submitting secondaries. What type? Prepare ahead of time for secondaries. Oh, that's a good one. That's a great one. That's what you wanted them to learn, right?
Yes, that's the most important piece. Thank you.
I had no idea about this video interview. That's something fairly new, but it's on the MCAS site, Vita, V-I-T-A. Writing ideas, good. Interactive timeline website was a cool tip. 1 to 2 week turnaround and some good brainstorming ideas, great. Use an interactive timeline and cross off stuff already in my primary application. The video interview. Avoiding relation in essays. I don't quite understand what that means, but okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Let's see. Avoiding repetition. Thank you. Okay, good. Putting things in priority. They learned a lot. A lot of good responses here, Alicia.
Yay, great.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to thank Alicia for the excellent presentation and all the great advice she's given. We're going to take your more of your questions in just a few minutes. But before we do, I wanted to speak with you for a bit. Let's face it, it's hard to get into medical school. The numbers are what they are, right? Alicia has given you the what and why of responding well to secondary applications, right? She's told you how to address the most common questions, why it's important to address them in this way, and we're going to probably get into that a little bit more in the Q&A. But the how of applying that excellent advice to your individual situations, your qualifications, your goals, and your experiences, that how begs for individual advising from experienced professionals who can guide you through the lengthy and grueling process that is medical school admissions. And that individual advising, as you'll see in a moment, is a key factor not only in applying successfully, but also in applying confidently. And that's really your goal now. You want to apply successfully and confidently. Given the complexity of the application process and the odds, you need a guide who knows the process inside and out and who can support you through this demanding journey. You need Accepted to be your guide. With Accepted, you can save time, apply with confidence, apply successfully, access professional expert advice, get it from somebody who's experienced and somebody who's objective about your writing. We have the admissions experts, the guides, who can mentor you through the process so that you achieve your goal of applying confidently and successfully. former admissions directors, committee members, post-bac program directors like Alicia, and highly experienced medical school admissions consultants. They can be your guide through the process. And here's what I suggest you do after the webinar. Visit accepted.com/medessays. Choose a service that's right for you. Get the guidance you need for that missing how that I just talked about, and go from confusion to clarity, from doubts to confidence. Now, some of you may say, isn't accepted expensive? Well, so is rejection. You're going to invest several $1,000s in applications. Wouldn't it make sense to invest a little bit more to make sure they're actually good? Our fees are clear, but the cost of rejection is not quite as obvious, even though it can be significantly higher. So let's take a look at the cost of not getting accepted. The risks. The cost of reapplication can easily be several $1,000s, especially if you have to retake the Mcat or have to travel for interviews, which at the moment I realize nobody's doing. That could be back, though, by the spring, not to mention next year. You have an additional year of earnings at a much lower level than after you earn your MD or DO degree. And there's the potential that you could have gotten into a better program with greater lifetime opportunities and even earnings. And however you define better is up to you. Now, every year we work with applicants who talked to us a year earlier and decided after taking the do-it-yourself approach and getting rejected that they wanted to work with us. We're happy to work with them, but they would have been better off working with us initially, and so would you. Enough from me. What do accepted clients say? Here's some feedback on Alicia from her clients. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to read excerpts. I'm very busy because I am a med student. I was offered 4 interviews total and was accepted to 2 schools. I chose to attend UCI.
Oh, Linda, I can't hear you. Hello? Linda?
In Orlando. I'm eternally grateful.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Am I back now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yep.
Okay, I think it was an internet thing. Or the next one. My experience working with Alicia was amazing. The turnaround time for editing my secondaries was very short and allowed me to really push ahead in having my applications out earlier. Alicia's input for my essays was invaluable. I would highly recommend using Alicia for the application process. Now,
well, I didn't want them to miss that part.
yeah. Alicia is a wonderful, skilled, talented consultant, but there's only one of her, and she does book up. I don't want you to think that we don't have other talented experts on the staff, so here is a little more feedback. And again, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I felt very lucky to be able to work with Dr. Gordon during the last application cycle. Dr. Gordon has been very responsible in editing my secondaries and preparing me for my interviews. I still remember Dr. Gordon and I spent 7 or 8 drafts just on one 250-word secondary essay, which I believe played a huge role in my acceptance to that medical school. This applicant was accepted to Northwestern, Emory, the University of Michigan, and UCLA. Or the last one on the page, I cannot be happier today. The tone of my text sounds so personal, professional, consequential, and so true. Your work is spectacular. Thank you so much. Now, we'd love to help you as we help the authors of those comments you just saw and thousands of others over the last 25 years. So once again, this is what I recommend you do as a follow-up to today's webinar. It's on your screen. Visit accepted.com/medessays. Choose the service that's right for you. Get the guidance you need and apply confidently and effectively. And as I mentioned at the beginning, there we have a special offer for webinar registrants, $100 off any order over $12.50. And now we have a ton of questions here. Okay.
Yay!
Okay. Yes. Lydia, if it's okay, I'm going to unmute you. You have 2 very good questions. If you don't want to be unmuted, don't worry. I'll just ask you questions. Lydia, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Go ahead.
Hi, Lydia.
Hey, Alicia. Thank you for your presentation today.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I had 2 questions. I was wondering, is it okay to speak about an experience, let's say like scribing, in different ways when responding to different questions?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the questions you get, but if you get a question about working with a diverse team, that might work for it. If you get a question about, your most meaningful clinical experience, that could also work. So depending on what your other experiences are, that one could work for a lot of different types of questions. But I would say be careful about writing about the same activity too many times. So I would only cover scribing for one essay question within one school's secondary application. But I wouldn't use it as a response for 2 or more essays. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
Within
does.
within the same application.
Okay. It's because I was thinking of there's a DO school that asks about, professionalism. And I was planning to use my experiences as a scribe to talk about different qualities that I can highlight to answer that question, the same question, but use scribing to answer different qualities. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it sounds like that would work, but I would just make sure you only use scribing for that one, for that one question, not for every question on that same secondary, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, makes sense. Thank you. And for my next
Yeah.
question, I looked it up on your website and I got the answer. So it was
Okay.
the spreadsheet that you shared
Okay.
about.
Okay, great.
Oh, great, great, great.
All right. Thank you very much, Lydia. All right. So, Peyton asks a closely related question. Should we avoid using the experiences we wrote about in the personal statement in our secondaries?
Not necessarily. It's going to depend on the scope of the secondary questions. If they say don't include anything from the primary, definitely don't do that. But if they say it's okay to include, some things from the primary, if it's your best example of meaningful clinical, or if it's the best example you have of a topic that the secondary essay question is asking you for, then that may be the best option.
Okay, great. Shivani has a very interesting question. And again, I'm going to try and unmute him so he can ask the question. Actually, I think he's no longer here, so we're not going to ask his question. Okay. Marina asks, what if I've taken the MCAT and did not score well? Should I wait to submit this application after I retake the MCAT the second time, even if schools are going to send secondaries without MCAT scores? That's a tough one to answer.
Yeah, that's tough because it's going to depend on the dates. But this year, again, is going to be very strange, and medical schools are accepting MCAT scores much later. So I think I need more information to answer that question.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so here we have a question from anonymous attendee. Do we describe our experiences with a story?
It depends. It depends on how many characters you have or words for the essay. It depends on the nature of the question, the scope of the question, and how much space you have, I would say.
Okay. And James has a good question. I'm going to unmute him. And James, if you want to speak your question, you can do so.
Hi, James here. I guess I was wondering, a lot of schools ask if you've already graduated, and I'm a non-traditional student that's been working for several years, and they ask you to summarize your activities. One school asks to do it chronologically, some just say summarize. I filled up in my primary most work activities section, so I used a lot of those activities. Do I leave gaps in answering this question, or do I cover them again, or try and spin them in a different light, or what? How do I tackle that?
Ooh, I have 2 things to say about that. A really interesting question. The first is that if they're asking you to tell them what you've been doing since you graduated, if there's a gap, it may be inevitable that you have to cover things you've already covered in the primary. That's okay because they're asking you to do that, right? The nature of the question, they're asking you, what you've done since graduating. So that question just may require you to repeat those things. The second point is in every part of the application process, and this would be something all of you could do, and I highly recommend you do. but for each step of the process, I recommend that you go out and get more activities, more experiences. For example, after you submit the primary, you want to start doing something new, right, so that you can write about it in your secondaries. After you've submitted secondaries, you want to go do something else different or new to write, to talk about in your interviews. And you should keep using that approach. If you need to send update letters, if you interview and you're waiting to hear back from schools, you might want to send an update letter. So again, doing something new from after you interview till, while you're waiting to hear back from the schools about their decision. So I understand, like with the pandemic, that it's really hard to have access to a lot of opportunities at this point, but there are some really cool things you can be doing from home. Easy things would be like sewing masks to donate to hospitals, volunteer tutoring online. There are so many kids who need help. There's lots of, and I have a list for my clients of really cool things you can do safely from home, but to keep building on your skills and your activities. But yeah, you'll want to keep looking for new activities, new opportunities.
Right. And another thing that I was recommended on a recent podcast is any kind of telephonic hotline work. Okay, so you're interacting with people, usually people with problems, people under stress. That would make for a very good kind of clinical experience under the circumstances. Obviously, the food deliveries to vulnerable populations.
Yep.
Working with the homeless. Tracing, contact tracing, another one that the pandemic.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah. Yeah.
So there are opportunities. If you look at some of the recent Admission Straight Talk podcasts, you'll see that this has come up again and again. And in the two student cases that I interviewed people, they were mostly talking about medical students, but there were some excellent suggestions for pre-meds also, in terms of contacting local hospitals and basically saying, what can I do? I know I can't go in, but what can I do? So, there are things that can be done. Okay, and you might have to call several hospitals so you get a positive answer, or perhaps a nursing home, or something like that. But hospice, see if there's something that you can do. Right now we have.
Yeah, a cool thing I've heard a student recently talk about was writing letters to residents of elderly homes.
Yes,
And
actually, that's on the
pretty
chat
neat
window
thing.
right now. Telephone patient representative is a good one too, or a virtual scribe. Excellent. Great
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, virtual scribe. I haven't heard of that one. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And then Kayla writes, hospitals near me need child life specialists because people who usually volunteer with sick kids are older or pregnant or otherwise immunocompromised. My daughter's actually a child life specialist. That's her profession. So she's still going to the hospital. But okay.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So here we have another. Thank you very much for your question. It was an excellent one. Okay. Here's another question from an anonymous caller. Does it matter what job we do during a gap year?
It depends. Yeah, it definitely matters. It depends
Yes.
on your background and what would make you a more competitive applicant. For example, if you don't have much hands-on clinical experience, right, that'd be the best thing you could do is to get more hands-on clinical experience. So that's going to depend on your specific background.
Right, but it does matter.
It definitely matters, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Another anonymous attendee, or perhaps the same one, asks, you receive a rejection email if you don't pass the secondary screening process?
Usually, that's a good question. Usually the rejections come much later. Like, you're not going to get one a week or two after you submit your secondary. It's going to take some time. A lot of schools sort of send them at the end of the season. What's your experience with that, Linda?
Yeah, they come late. They keep the option of sending them till the very end. They come later.
I mean, that'd be kind of cold to submit your secondary and bam, you get a rejection. You must have had to offend someone or something, because it takes time. It's a lot of time and effort to read through thousands. Just think of how many secondaries, right, schools are receiving, right? They're reading through hundreds and hundreds of essays as quickly as they can. So be patient, right? It's going to take a while. And for rejections, you're probably just not going to hear about that until the end of the season.
Right. Elaine writes, I feel like I wrote about everything I have done. Should I just mention a different anecdote? I just started research, so I guess I can elaborate on that. I briefly mentioned it in my primary activities section.
Well, I missed the first part of the question.
Sure. It's, I feel like I wrote about everything I have done. Should I just mention a different anecdote? I just started research, so I guess I can elaborate on that. I briefly mentioned it in primary
stuff you can be doing. Yeah, there's stuff you can be doing right now. There's always something that you can be doing. You can be earning certifications, or there's always ways you can improve your application. So I would say there's definitely things you can be doing.
You can also approach certain activities from a different angle entirely. If you spoke about, I don't know, some community service activity in terms of actually serving a particular population, perhaps you can write about in another context in terms of teamwork or leadership, interacting with your peers. So there's different angles you can take. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Jennifer asks, are the biographical types of questions also part of the Casper?
No. So Casper is more of a situational based judgment test. So it's going to be your reactions to ethical situations, to morally compromising situations. It'll be more about how you respond to complex situations that come up.
Okay. Now, Deborah has an interesting question. It's probably going to be too complicated to answer on the call, but maybe we can have her ask the question and just discuss for a minute some of the things she should consider. Or, again, we're happy to work with her individually. So, Deborah, you can now talk.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just wondering if we're still waiting to take the Mcat in August. Should we wait to add the majority of our schools that we want to apply so that our secondaries are submitted in a timely manner, as opposed to getting them, I guess, once the transmission date happens tomorrow?
Okay. Yeah, this year is so different. This is really hard. I would say it depends. It depends on how your practice test scores were looking. It depends on how you feel the exam went. For example, I have a student who took the test last weekend, and there was construction going on. So I know, can you believe that? So they provided noise-canceling headphones, but she still felt really distracted by the situation. And in hindsight, she realizes she should have avoided the score. And, she knows it's probably going to be lower than her previous score. So it depends on how things went. Like, how did you feel about the test? The sooner you add schools, and it might change. The thing is that if you wait for your MCAT score, it might change the schools you submit your application to, right? There'll be more strategy involved because you have that information. I think it's going to be a judgment call. If it were me, I would base my decision on my practice test scores and how I felt about the exam. It might be better to get those schools, the application submitted to those schools, because it is, right, rolling admissions. It saves your place. But if you're looking for a compromise, the compromise would be to submit to the schools that you would apply to no matter what, right? Submit to the schools that are your top choices, the schools where you're a resident of the state, and then add more later once you get your score. That would be the compromise. What would you say, Linda?
Yeah, I was thinking the same way. It's a real, if you're very confident in your score, then I would say just go ahead and submit and to the schools that you feel confident of getting acceptance to with a score that you anticipate getting. In the worst case, you'll have to add some lower down the food chain later on. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah,
Okay.
that'd be a safe approach, like a good compromise.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, good luck. Good luck.
Okay. So We have a couple of questions about Vita. Do you think a lot of schools will use Vita plus a video interview with an actual interviewer?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. From what I've read,
Yeah.
it looks like the Vita is going to be in place of an interview,
Really?
but I'm not sure. Yeah, from what I've seen, it looks like this is a safe way during a pandemic to determine whether a student would be a good match for their school. But not all the schools are going to participate in the Vita, so you still may have some interviews at other campuses that aren't participating.
I think you're also going to find that some schools, and I read about a couple like that, I just don't remember which ones, they're going to use the Vita as a screening tool before the interview, the real interview.
Ooh,
But the real interview will be still conducted if all the social distancing and travel restrictions are still in place, then it'll be conducted via video, Zoom, Skype.
I mean,
whatever.
the situation's so dynamic.
Yeah, it's
right?
changing constantly.
Like, it's so dynamic. I mean, it may be possible that interviews get scheduled or are canceled. Like, we just don't know what the situation's going to be, right?
Right.
Yeah.
What was, and then somebody else is asking, what was the website that allowed you to make the timeline of your life? I think
Okay, Sutori. So SUTORI.com, Sutori.com. It's excellent. You can use it for free, but they do have options for paid access if you want to use it for teaching, or it's pretty cool.
Okay. And an anonymous attendee asks, so you shouldn't include anything from the primary app in the secondary?
It depends on the question.
That's right.
It really depends on the question.
Yeah.
You may have to, if it's like, what have you done since you graduated? If that includes time, activities that you put in the primary, you might have to cover that again. Or, if the question is, tell us about your interests, your reasons for going into medicine, but don't, duplicate anything from the primary. It just depends on what the question is.
Right. I think in general, just strategically, you want to give the schools as many reasons as possible to accept you.
Yeah.
So again, this kind of goes back to my thing that you don't want to be writing, or not just mine, Alicia gave the same advice about the same thing over and over and over again. You don't want to be that one-trick pony. So you can, unless the school says, do not tell us about what you wrote in the primary, in which case it's pretty obvious that you shouldn't. You can, again, write about the experiences from different angles, making sure to answer the secondary application question and show fit with the school's mission and values. So, follow the directions. This is not something that we can say categorically, never do this. No, we can't say that. That would be very poor advice.
Yeah. Always and never, right?
Yeah.
Don't cut it. Yeah.
Admissions. Certainly not this year. Let's see. If you're currently not working and only focusing on Mcat and applications, how do you answer the second question of what are you currently doing?
Ooh, I think it's dangerous not to be doing anything else. What do you think, Linda?
I agree. At least volunteer, some volunteer
situation.
commitment, some clinical, something.
Yeah, there's always something to do.
Right. Okay, I would agree with that. Let's see. We've answered most of the questions. Okay, here's one. I know plenty of schools ask you to explain a gap in your activities greater than 3 months, for example. How would a woman write about pregnancy or miscarriage or motherhood without then triggering discrimination?
So it's, legal for schools to discriminate against you for any of those reasons. I don't think that it's anything that you should hide. I would recommend that you write about it if you're comfortable, if you're comfortable sharing it. Because anything you write about in the application, the primary and the secondaries, are things, right, that could possibly be brought up in an interview if there is, an in-person or person-to-person interview. So I would recommend writing about those things if you feel comfortable doing that.
And if it's relevant to the question.
Yeah.
Let's see. Abby asks, have they released information about which schools are participating in AAMC's Vita? I think there is a list, but I'm not sure if it's current or how current it is.
Yeah, I don't know that they have. They said schools are going to. They'll be posting which schools are participating, but I don't know that that's yet available. I didn't see them.
Right.
Yeah, I'm looking right now.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, it said that the schools it'll be available in July, but yeah, I'm not seeing the list yet.
We've addressed now almost all the questions that were in the question window. The ones that I'm not addressing, it's either they're probably just going to be really difficult to address in this context. So I think we're going to move on. I want to thank attendees very much for your time, your questions, your answers, your participation, and obviously thank you very, very much to Alicia for an outstanding webinar. I'd like to share 2 thoughts and a story before we part. Remember the advice that Alicia has given you for your secondaries about being authentic, being timely, timeliness throughout, balance of the stories, and steady effort, and so much more, right? Getting those things out, working between when you submit your primary and you start getting your secondaries. So if you're worried about churning out those secondary essays quickly while showing the fit necessary to snag interview invitations, not to mention prepping for the interviews themselves, and if you're anxious about spending the next year running this marathon, remember the excellent advice that Alicia has given you today and your goal. Apply successfully and confidently. Here's feedback from a client who worked with Accepted. I've been thinking about this whole crazy process after being accepted to 3 medical schools, and I know that I wouldn't have had a prayer if it weren't for your substantial help, especially for someone like me whose numbers are a little below average. So I can't express my appreciation to you enough. You have helped me immeasurably. You greatly de-stressed an important part of the process, and I felt much more confident in my essays after working with you. Slightly no numbers, concerned about the quality and quantity of writing you will have to do. Can you relate? He dealt with his concerns by working with Accepted. He applied confidently and successfully. He's now a med student. You can be too. Get Accepted. Now, I also have a question for you. We've been answering questions. Now I have a question for you folks. Okay? You've listened, and Alicia, you can chime in the next few minutes in this dialogue. You've listened to the presentation, you listened to the Q&A, listened to the pitch. What is causing you to hesitate from engaging with somebody like Alicia or Alicia herself? And you can put it whatever window you want. Okay, cost. That's from Erica. Anybody else? Cost. Nothing. I already sent an email. Okay, we look forward to working with you, Andrew. Still a few ways away from applying. Okay, that makes sense if it's too early. Though sometimes we do help people several years away from applying. They just get our advice so that they're better positioned when they actually apply, and we love that. Now let me address the cost part of it. Obviously you have $100 off on the screen. Applying to medical school is an expensive process, I realize. I also realize that times are hard. And the thing about Accepted is, number one, you can start with a 1-hour purchase. That's $330. It's basically the cost of 2 secondary applications. So that 1 hour, you can get a lot of advice and feedback on your essays. Or you can buy a more comprehensive service or more hours discounted, and know that if you can stop at any time and get a refund of the unused portion of your time, so you're not locked in. We've been in business for 26 years at this point. So and the staff is made up, as I said, of former post-bac program directors, highly experienced admissions consultants, former admissions directors, MDs, committee members, admissions committee members. You're investing a lot in the application process. perhaps it makes a lot of sense to invest a little more and make sure the other money is invested well. And that is the best answer I think I can give for those of you concerned about cost. And I know it's a genuine concern. I'll tell you folks a secret. It's not really a secret. It won't be a secret. But on the 15th, we're actually having a price rollback for 1 week. So if you get in touch with us now, today is the 9th, the 15th is Wednesday, then you will be positioned to just take advantage of that price rollback to 2017 prices. So that will also save you and reduce the cost a bit. Okay. Alicia, do you have anything to add?
I love what I do. I love working with my students. And I pride myself on being able to support them through such a stressful process. And now with the pandemic and everything going on, I really want to help take the stress out of this process as much as possible. And not only help students, of course, get accepted, but to give you tools, strategies, techniques to excel in this process and, use these things in your medical education and in your career. So I hope that you will all consider working with accepted.com. We have incredible people, and it would be an honor to work with you.
And you can request Alicia, by the way. As long as she's available, that's whom you'll work with. All right, with that, I want to again thank you very, very much for your time and your attention, your participation, your questions, your answers, and I want to wish you much, much, much success as you apply to medical school. Thanks again, Alicia. It was a great webinar.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Linda.
And the thank yous are coming in for you, Alicia. Very welcome, folks. You're very welcome. Good luck. Take care.